Welcome, everybody, to Traction Thursday. It is my pleasure to introduce Jeff Topel, who's going to talk about his regenerative farming exhibition and project. So there you go. Let's welcome him.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for coming. I'm going to talk about my overambitious goals and business plans today. So a little background about me. So I printed these out so I don't have to turn around all the time. So I went to UW-Madison. I'm a Badger. Grew up in Wisconsin and studied biological systems engineering with a natural resources emphasis. And after that, I spent 2 years doing what I studied. So I worked in an environmental engineering company, doing conservation projects, things like the NRCS would do to clean up lakes and rivers. And worked in the soils department at UW-Madison in doing GIS work and watershed modeling research. I spent 18 years, still work at John Deere in precision agriculture, doing software development. I visited hundreds of farms around the country and the world, so it's a pretty awesome opportunity. My wife is from here originally, so that's how I ended up here. And we have 3 daughters. 2 of them are 3.5 months old. So I'll take you on a little journey. So the road trip started in Lake Mills, Wisconsin. That's where I grew up. Went to Madison, spent 8 years there. I went to Chicago for 2 years to work with John Deere, and then moved to Des Moines to work with John Deere. Was there for 10 years, and now I'm here. So my family farm. So picture on the left is where I grew up. In the 1980s, this was a mid-sized Wisconsin dairy farm, about 60 cows. And my parents, my older sister, still farm. They have 500 dairy cows now on the right side there, 10 miles away from where I grew up. And they built pretty much all of that over the last 20 years. 8 robotic milkers, robotic calf feeders, and they are a mid-sized dairy farm today in Wisconsin. So there are a lot of 2,000, 5,000 cow dairy farms, and think of how many of the 60 cow dairy farms that those could replace. So we don't drink more milk in the United States, right? We only need a certain number of cows, so divide those up by the number of farms. Living on a farm was a pretty cool experience. I got to learn how to solve problems regardless of the circumstances. So if it's 20 degrees outside and something breaks, you have to fix it. If you have something to do at night, you can't do it, you have to milk the cows, right? So every day. How to build and repair things. My dad is an excellent mechanic, so that's like his specialty. So he's able to keep a smaller farm going by buying older equipment and fixing it, making it run. With 500 cows, they barely buy any new equipment. The economics don't work for it. I got to appreciate nature. So we had a wetland behind our house. I spent a lot of time out there, and that's what kind of drove me into natural resources work. And of course, on a dairy farm, a lot of manual labor, which comes in handy over your life if you appreciate kind of the journey. That's not so bad. I noticed as I was growing up, the waters kept getting dirty and dirtier, right? So the pictures on the right are 2 lakes in Wisconsin, algal blooms. It takes 4 parts per billion of phosphorus to set off an algal bloom. It's something like, I don't know, parts per million nitrogen. So a lot of dairy manure in Wisconsin, a lot of algal blooms, but that's only part of the story. There's a lot of urban runoff, a lot of leaves, a lot of lawn fertilizers, a couple inches from storm drain, all goes in the lake. Picture on the left is the Iowa River in Iowa City. A lot of foam in there that really shouldn't be in a waterway, right? How do the fish live? So starting out, I wanted to clean up waterways. And I had opportunity to go work for John Deere. Precision agriculture has a lot of capabilities. So the tools that have been developed over the last 30 years let farmers do their own research. They can have yield monitors on their combines. They have data from the planters. Everything is collected over GIS, GPS. Computer software can automatically compare the results. They can try things on a part of the field, and it's real-world research. Tram lines reduce compaction. If your GPS is steering your tractor, you can easily cover the same tracks over and over. You can reduce the amount of fertilizer or chemicals by 70% in modern cases. The sprayer, if you see up there, it is not spraying on all the nozzles. It has cameras that sense where the weeds are, and it only sprays the weeds. Planting green in the top left is very important for regenerative agriculture, and it's very hard to do that without GPS. You can't get your exact 30-inch row spacing. On the bottom right, you've got strip till. So they're only 12-inch width of where that row is tilled. The rest of the ground is not tilled. It's hard to follow that track without GPS, right? So documentation for carbon credits, operating when you need to. If you've got, a farmer has 10,000, 20,000 acres, it's hard to know all the land. You can't just drive around and see it all in a day, right? So you could use computer models to tell you where the soil is ready to be worked so you're not causing compaction, working on wet soil, things like that. What's the problem with all these things? They're very expensive. So I would like to see mid-sized farmers have a way to make it in the long term, right? About 15 years ago, I read In Defense of Food and learned about nutrient-dense diets and how important for your health it is to get proper nutrition. And how most of our foods in the grocery store can't get you that. The lettuce, carrots, they don't have the amount of nutrient density that they did 40 years ago or 100 years ago. And there's so many factors. Like, we could talk for days about all of this. But then Growing Revolution changed my world, because I found out that farmers are already at a large scale increasing their soil organic matter by like 8%, which was unheard of. People thought maybe it takes 100 years to do 1%. They do it by no-till plus cover crops together. That is kind of a new concept, but it's very central to regenerative agriculture. Faith Reeves introduced me to John Kemp, his podcast, and I've learned so much. For the Love of Soil by Nicole Masters, a really good book talking about soil microbes and how to improve soil health at a large scale. And then Practical Farmers Bio and Green Cover Seeds have really excellent webinars. So I've read many books, watched thousands of YouTube videos, and that was like before I moved here and started farming. So it was like, I need to do this myself if I want to try to help other farmers do this someday. Just prove myself I know how to do it. I'm not just talking. So we bought a farm. It has 4 acres of cropland, and it was uncertain how long we're going to be here, whether like I have to move for work, whether I would ever have enough time to do this. So I started really small. I didn't want to buy anything that cost more than $500. I did buy a planter that cost $4,600, but that was like on the cheap. So started baling hay. It was 4 acres of like long-term hay fields. So I baled hay and I interseeded crops, cover crops, try to improve the diversity to improve the soil health of those fields. I learned a lot. I had a lot of old broken equipment that I needed to fix up. So it was really good to have a couple years to just learn how to operate, learn how to set up, learn how to deal with southern Iowa weather. It's new to me. The really hot May and June is difficult. Hot, humid Junes are difficult. So it was a good way to get started, to not invest very much. Got really lucky about 2 years ago. There's land for sale in the neighborhood a mile away. Was able to buy 140 acres with friends. About 2/3 of it is farmable, and it's pretty steep. It's recreational land. Most farmers, large farms, wouldn't want to deal with it. So we started carving out the flat spaces where I could do practice, right? Like learn without spending too much money on seed, fertilizer, learn what works, and do crop rotations. You need a lot of fields to do crop rotations. So a little bit about regenerative agriculture. It's centric around, soil health is centric to it, right? So what degrades soil health? tillage, synthetic pesticides, fertilizers, soil exposed to hot sun, and compaction, mineral imbalance, number of other things. So these pictures are all from my farm. I've done a lot of tillage. So early on, I decided I wanted to be organic because I was on a small farm. I thought there's profit in that. I'm lucky that I did. The more I learn about it, the more important it is to me. And a co-op wouldn't want to come and spray 2 acres for me anyway, and I don't want to be around the chemicals. I don't want my kids to be around the chemicals. So if you don't have Roundup, how do you kill grass? Then how do you plant, right? Oats, soybeans, whatever you want to plant. You have to terminate the grass somehow. I started out with, I built a cultivator, or I bought an old cultivator and put 30-inch sweeps on it. So basically cover the whole area at 4-inch depth. That would probably work great in certain soils with not much residue, crop residue, but in the heavy soils here, it wasn't tough enough. So I bought a heavy disc, and that is not heavy enough, would not penetrate the soil when you're inside. Then I bought a moldboard plow because that's what they're made for. That's John Deere was, his invention was moldboard plow. Prairie lands, hence a dense, heavy soil. And it worked great for flipping over that plant residue, and then you get you terminate the plants, but you get really rough soil that dries out really fast. Is not good for soil health anyway. It's really rough to drive over that. I didn't like it. So then I bought a disc chisel, finally found one that I could afford, and I put sweeps on the back. So instead of, these are made to dig down deep, I put sweeps on it so I can keep it shallow, about 3 or 4 inches, and just cut the roots off of plants. Can also dig deeper if I need to. Regenerative agriculture, a really cool definition by John Kemp, is that it can produce plants that are resistant to diseases and insects, so that those plants can transfer that immunity to the people who eat them. And of course, you don't have to spray pesticides if they're resistant. So, like for example, you see airplanes flying over every fall around here, spraying fungicide on their cornfields, right? That's for tar spot. It's a huge problem. Greatly reduces yield. But if you apply the proper plant nutrition, the proper environment for the soil microbes, they can have a symbiotic relationship with the crop roots, and then we don't have to spray pesticides. It takes a long time. It takes time to get there. Few years, not sure. So if you have soil health, rain infiltrates. It doesn't run off. That means you don't have erosion. You don't have the nutrients being carried down the stream and causing algal blooms. So that's a game changer, right? So in college, I did a rainfall study. We rained an inch in 10 minutes on different types of soil. On tilled soil without much residue, 90% of that water ran off. On native prairie, 0% of it ran off. So if you can get soil health to be close to a native prairie, we don't have to build so many prairie strips, although they're still awesome. The dams and all the conservation structures that aren't really getting the job done right now won't be as important. We can sequester carbon. Rodale Institute says that if farms around the world practiced regenerative soil health at a really good pace, we could sequester all the carbon that humans have created. It could regenerate small farms because then they're not giving most of their profits to the agrochemical industry. Could regenerate small communities because if we have more small farmers, we have more income, more people in the small communities. What improves soil health? Symbiotic relationships between the soil microbiome and living roots. So what do you need? You need diverse crops, diverse plants. Thanks, Faith, for teaching me these things. We need proper plant nutrition, micronutrients. A good way to do that is do soil tests, get sap analysis, so you know exactly what you're missing. Thanks for John Kemp for teaching me that. Cover crops and no-till. So keep living roots in the soil all year round. and add biologicals because we have to add them back. It's not like the native forest that was here 200 years ago. The microbes are in a kind of a, well, they're missing. They come back slowly over time, but we can add them back through spraying. So I've got a tank I mounted on my planter. It sprays into the furrow, micronutrients and biologicals while I'm planting, and then use the sprayer to spray foliar spray based on what the crop needs throughout the year. So that way I can apply way less fertilizer than what a normal farmer would, which is much more economical, right? A little side note about small grains in Iowa. So if you want diverse cover crops, you want cover on the soil in the spring, small grains, wheat, oats are a good way to do that. At one point, like 100 years ago, there were more oats grown in Iowa than any other crop. So, we get a lot of heavy rains in April. If there's oats growing out there, the rain is going to hit the leaves, not hit the soil. That means you won't have the runoff. But it's too hot for cool season grasses. It's too humid for cool season grasses. Native Iowa vegetation was typically warm season grasses. So it's challenging, but it's possible. I think soil health will help a lot with this. If we don't get mycotoxins because we have good soil health, we can grow wheat here again. What do you do with small grains? So back in the 60s, there was like a feed mill in every small town, and you just take your grains there and sell it. Today, most of those are gone. The ones that are left are like part of larger corporations, and they only buy corn and soybeans. So I bought some pigs, and I bought some chickens, and my small acres. You could still grow small grains and ship them up to Minnesota, but they would have to be really high quality, which I'm not that good at yet. But you can feed them to animals. And Practical Farmers of Iowa is doing a lot of research with hybrid rye as a hog feed. So yeah. And it's fun. It's fun to have animals. Can a small farm make a living? So I should have put Just a Few Acres Farm is a really cool YouTube channel out in New York. This guy quit his architecture job, started farming, and he's got some good videos about the business aspect of it. So here's the way I categorize farm sizes. It could be a little different depending who you talk to, but 0 to 10 acres would be like a market grower, like vegetables, CSAs. 10 to 500 acres could be a small farm. If you could have like 1,000 goats on 10 acres, make a living, sort of. 500 to 2,500 acres would be a mid-sized crop farm, would be a large animal farm. Like my dad has about 700 acres with 500 cows. And so if you have animals above the line, something special, some specialty, like specialty crops, organic, you can make a go at it. Maybe you have off-the-farm income. Your wife or your husband works off the farm to get your health insurance. You can make a go at it. But why did I put the red line there? Because I think that's where you have to be below that line to make a living at farming. So how many people have that much land? I guess the other way you could do it is you're above the line if you own your land, if you don't have a lot of debt, right? The guys below that, they pay high rent prices. And I've got numbers on the right side. So these are rough numbers. Take it with a grain of salt. But a lot of the inputs have quadrupled in price over the last 20 years. The corn price is double. It's not 4 times more, right? So where did the profit go? So that's why back in the 90s, if you had 500 acres, you could kind of make a living crop farming. Now you kind of need 2,500. So my farm, I've invested about $100,000 in equipment, all this old stuff that normal farmers wouldn't use anymore. I think I could farm up to about 400 acres with that. Potentially, if I ever got bored, wanted to retire someday, I'm interested in doing things like this. Like if you're certified organic, if you sell specialty grains. If you may, I was in Germany visiting a friend, and his parents had a small orchard, and in their town in Bavaria, there's a little bottling plant where everybody could bring their own pears, apples, and that plant would take half of it and then make the other half into juice, give you the juice back in glass bottles. It was the best juice I've ever had, so I kind of want to do that. Regenerative agriculture, can I help other farmers do that? I love pasture-raised pork. Hey, thank you. So yeah, there's a way, like if I was retired, if I didn't have debt, right? If I can pay down my debts, and I don't need it as my sole income to support those twins we just had, right? I could farm. So maybe someday. Some resources, maybe we can send this out after. These are some really awesome YouTube videos. You'll learn a lot. And that's what I've got.
Very good, Jeff. Very good. So at this point, we will go ahead and open it up for questions. And I'll start. If I were just a small farm of under 500 acres and inherited it from my grandfather, and let's say he was a traditional farmer, crops with the bean corn rotation, how long would it take me to convert to be a regenerative organic farm? How many years will it take to get the soil in proper condition, give or take, based on your experience?
I don't know, but I would take a guess like 5 years if you were doing the right things. The hard part is, how do you know what the right things are to do? Which is why I kind of I put some resources here, right? Like, these are the best of the best that I've found, but there's hundreds of other videos on these channels, and you can learn so much on YouTube, which a lot of young farmers are doing these days. Practical Farmers of Iowa has meetups and farminars. They have where you can go to people's farm, and they connect up farmers together to help farmers learn from each other. It's so valuable. So yeah, if you were starting out and if you're involved in that group and you didn't have a mental block, right? Like Nicole Masters said, her biggest challenge in converting farmers to soil health practices is their own mind. You've been doing something for 40 years, and farming is challenging. You only get 40 or 50 chances to do it, right? That's how many growing seasons you get in your lifetime. So you don't want to mess one up. So that's why a lot of farmers don't feel like changing, because they know how to do something. But I've seen in Practical Farmers of Iowa, a lot of farms that are doing interesting, creative things had a different job for 20 years. So maybe they had outside experiences, they saw the value in other things, and they're willing to try it.
Great. Excellent. Thank you. Other questions? Oh, here we go.
When you were showing the picture of you disking in micronutrients and back there, so where did you get what you're putting in there? Where did you get the microbiomes and things?
Advancing Eco Agriculture. That's John Kemp's company. There's also a place down in Drakesville called Fox River Produce. It's an Amish place that has quite a bit of organic and good soil health things you could add to your soil. The thing is, I don't know that much about it. I trust AEA, Advancing Eco Agriculture, that they've done their work to know that the products that they sell are going to be very beneficial. There's so many regenerative or biological products out there. It's going to be the new boom in agrochemical companies are investing quite a bit in these things. If you ship them in a truck in 140 degree weather, they might die. I mean, so inside of a truck, if you just buy on UPS, right, and they ship on a hot summer day, your biologicals might be dead when you acquire them. So there's, I don't know how to ensure you have quality. People say test it. If you were to buy a large quantity of things, you want to test it before you apply it, and a lot of places will offer warranty.
Put your steps in.
Yeah.
Have you looked at carbon credits and how that can offset some of your costs?
I haven't. It would be interesting just to learn about. Since I'm trying to do so many things at once, I've cut out. Like I wanted to be certified organic, but I didn't have time. I just had to cut back on projects. Yeah, there's money in that for farmers. It's debatable whether it's really good for the environment, because let's say that a farmer is doing those practices for 5 years and then they till their field, a lot of the carbon's going to go back up in the atmosphere. So I kind of and if you do that, you're locked into certain crop rotations and plans, and so I like the freedom of doing whatever the weather calls for.
Good question. Going over. Hold on one sec.
This is just from my perspective as a consumer and concerned about my cognitive health as I age. It's been well known that pesticides are risk factors for certain diseases, in particular Parkinson's disease, and the pesticides that are going on the crops are really problematic. Whether a certain crop locally has pesticides, certified organic doesn't necessarily mean that the product is actually tested. I see there's a great opportunity to kind of create something in which your crop could be tested rapidly for certain pesticides and then labeled as pesticide-free. And so I'm hoping that the farm and small farm, local farm industry considers that, because I think that would be of high value in the market. Just a thought.
Okay. Very good. Questions? Good comment. Good comment. Questions? Come back here. Just start here.
Okay, thank you. Basically, when we are comparing about commercial farming and coming down to call it either permaculture or more growing, complementing crops together for regeneration. If I connect that to the precision agriculture, simply there are too many variables with too many crops and too many animals. We need to collect more data. We need to collect more this. It helps, but is that profitable and manageable with more data for farmers, more analysis to do? How can we create a balance, regenerative and precision agriculture?
Do you mean is it profitable to collect the data? Like, or does it cost too much?
Yes, like from farmer's perspective, if I'm interested in doing regenerative agriculture and also manage that with precision agriculture with more sensors and more data to come in, like, is that more a complexity or is that more insight for me for better managing a profit?
I've seen the last few years a lot of those large farms are doing that. They're because it's good for business. They're integrating some practices. They are testing what happens. So let's say I plant cover crops on part of the field and I don't plant them on the other part. I apply certain biologicals on one spot and I leave a strip where I didn't. Then the yield monitor and the combine can go through and measure all that. So if you have a farm that's over 2,500 acres, it's not that hard if you have the mindset for it, right? But if you have less than that, you can't afford a yield monitor necessarily, right? Like there's limits. But then that's where organizations like Practical Farmers of Iowa come in, the land-grant universities. Some of them are doing good work on this topic. So then farms collaborate together. Different soils, different part of every state, different county need different solutions. Different farming types in different parts of the country need different solutions. So yeah, there's a lot of work to do.
That's good.
Just an observation on what you were saying. Our company helped get the non-GMO project off the ground, and there was a lot of resistance from the organic sector that they didn't want to have to do any more testing, and GMOs weren't being tested for in organic, and then they were getting contaminated. Organic crops were getting contaminated. So there was a lot of pushback, but eventually there's enough consumer demand that it happened. But when it comes to pesticides, it's the exact same thing. It's tough to make money as a farmer. So to add a whole layer of testing as to whether there's, and then to find out that your crop maybe is not sellable as organic because there's been drift, is a disaster for a farmer. So it's a pretty tough thing, and I'm sure you find even get certified organic is expensive, and a lot of farmers just can't afford that. So the economics of all this become really, really tough. I just want to make an observation. I also went to Madison.
Go Badgers. Here you go, Kevin.
Because you're a little more connected to a variety of farmers around the state and, well, around the whole region, I would imagine. But what do you see for Iowa? A lot of us would like to see more regenerative farming encouraged, supported around here, but you could see it going both ways. What are your predictions? What do you anticipate for 5 years, 10 years down the road?
There's cover crop seed businesses popping up everywhere. There's farmers looking for another source of profit, so they're creating cover crop seed. Cover crops will continue to grow. I don't know if it's exponentially, but I see farmers planting them more and more. I also see Iowa lagging behind probably most of the country in that, right? So I've heard that in Indiana, more than 60% of farm fields have cover crops, and it has to do with good leadership at the state level for that kind of thing. So yeah, the leadership at the state level and Iowa State University would help to increase the speed, but across, it's tough in corn and soybean country. When you harvest corn in October, what will grow after that as a cover crop? Pretty much just rye and camelina. And so there's a lot of work with camelina right now. Farmers are looking for something new. But the things that I watch thousands of YouTube videos, right? Most farmers aren't going to do that. I'm an engineer. I like analysis. So farmers pretty much do things when their neighbors are successful at it. So it's going to take some farmers that are influential in the neighborhoods to see results first, I think.
That's good.
What do you think of the possibilities of something happening somehow so that different organic growers and regenerative growers would be in the same area to avoid the drift issue?
I don't know if I should say this, but outlaw dicamba. Dicamba pesticide can pick up and move a mile a day later after it was sprayed. If we were to enforce the rules, it would help. So I've seen numerous occasions co-ops spray when the wind is blowing 20 miles per hour. Legally, they can't spray when it's over 10 miles per hour. And paraquat, the pesticide that causes Parkinson's, outlawed in Europe, have more limits on when you can use things like Roundup, like they do in Europe. It's tough. Yeah, there's a lot of conventional farms that had their crops ruined by dicamba because the neighbor sprayed it and it killed the other farm's corn or soybeans. And trees, oak trees, peach trees. A lot of the peach industry in Missouri was ruined by dicamba.
Wow, how about that? A little controversy on Traction Thursday.
It doesn't seem very controversial to me. You take responsibility for your actions, and you carry the liability if you screw up. I was curious, though, on this biologics that you were using. Have you come across, or are you using some kind of microfungal inputs into the soil that goes beyond just sort of the soil vitamin pills type of approach, but growing fungal networks?
I mix BioCoat Gold with all the seeds that I plant. So that's, what do you call it? Soil inoculant that has like 4 strains of mycorrhizal fungi and hundreds of bacteria that are beneficial and other things in it. And so that goes right on the seed. It's like a powder. and it's not very expensive. AEA just came out with a new product that's kind of like a boost for the seeds to give them the micronutrients, because the seed industry today doesn't necessarily create seeds that have enough micronutrients to get them out of the ground and healthy. So that's something to be aware of. I just learned a couple weeks ago. Yeah, smaller seeds are maybe easier to plant, and you get more in a bag. It's economical, but they have less nutrients in them to get the plant healthy in the first few weeks.
Wow, STEM education going on right here. This is great stuff. Any more questions for Jeff?
What can we do to help you?
I like your idea about letting me use your loading dock to get fertilizers delivered. Markets, right? Regenerative agriculture needs markets, need a place to sell wheat, soybeans that have maybe special qualities, right? So if you're growing crops that are proven to have a high nutrient value, can we have a market for those? Practical Farmers of Iowa is working on bringing animals back to Iowa. So rather than shipping feeder calves to Texas, grow them up here on pastures. We need consumers to buy the meat. Like, you got to pay a little extra because there's more. It's more manual labor for the farmer, less efficient maybe on overall scheme. Ideas. Community is good, right? So just having, like, this is awesome to have to meet with people, and yeah.
And as we develop the local food hub, as these initiatives begin as well, will help.
So would you be willing to do another farm day at your farm? We had a little informal one with a half a dozen of us. Would people be interested in going and visiting Jeff's farm? Okay, so we'll put that on the agenda.
That's great. All right, let's give Jeff another round. Thank you very much, Jeff. That was very informative.